Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast. We have made it through 7 rounds of football already in season 2024. Well, that was an interesting visual there, Liam. And you've kind of thrown me off my cues there. How many rounds if you include opening round? Is it 7 3/4? Oh my goodness me. Team Extreme from Liam there. He's slamming a tornado. He's drying up a seabed. I don't know what you're doing, Liam. It's quite strange. Anyway.
That's fine.
This is the intro now because I'm not doing a retake. So hello, everyone. Like, share, subscribe for this high-quality production value. This is the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast. I'm Jesse. That's Liam. We are back for another review of the round that was. Plus, for our deep dive this week, we're taking a look at all 18 teams in the competition and seeing where we think they stack up in the premiership picture for the remainder of the season. Make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, you're liking, sharing, and subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and dropping us a comment with where you think your team is going to end up in the grand scheme of things. It would help if you told us who that team was, but if you don't want to do it, if that's too personal information, you know what? Fair enough too. If you are listening on Spotify, Amazon, or Apple, make sure you're leaving a review if you're enjoying it. If you're not enjoying it, don't bother. Honestly, that's probably for the best if you don't. I shouldn't say this.
Thanks for the listen.
Thank you for the listen. Yeah. I shouldn't say this, but right now we're at a perfect 5 stars on Spotify.
Hey.
So I prefer to keep it that way.
Yes.
And I feel like we don't have too many controversial takes. And the good thing is the Secure supporters haven't found this podcast yet. So while we can keep those two kind of balls in the air and juggle those around for a bit, I think we'll be okay. But, of course, other podcast platforms, I only listen on Spotify, so you tell me, Liam, do we get a bunch of hate mail on Apple or Amazon telling us how much we suck?
No, Dave loves us. Dave loves us on Amazon, so that's okay. Apple, no, nothing yet. No hate mail, which was always nice to come into the week with. It's always nice. We don't like to hear the hate mail, although constructive feedback is always welcome.
Absolutely.
We do appreciate that in both this podcast and our daily lives. Give it to us. We need to know where to improve. Oh, I can't wait for the St Kilda review. Now, you call like 2 things. It's a half yearly. You got quarterly. Jesse, what's 3 called?
A trimester.
Like a trimester. We're in the first trimester of the AFL season, and so what better time to see where the teams are sitting? Who's contenders? Who's pretenders? Who are the duds?
I think we've learned enough. At 7 weeks through the season, every team bar Gold Coast and Essendon, and to me, I think one of those we probably could use another week for. But I think for the majority, getting to this kind of 7 games played, I think we can start to thin out where most teams are going to sit for the remainder of the season. I think we've already started to develop some. Certainly, we've developed a detached pack at the bottom. I think we're going to start seeing a bit of movement towards the top as well in the next couple of weeks as well. I
think so too. So why wait? Why wait for halfway through the season? Why wait for the bye rounds? We're going to do it right now. This is Jesse's, and to a certain extent me, but probably mostly Jesse's version of pretenders, contenders, and duds. Jesse, we're going to jump right into it because we've got 18 teams to go through. I nearly said 19, not yet.
I don't think Tasmania can win this year. I can get that one out of the way nice and quickly.
Dud. They're done for the year. Unbelievable. So I'm going to bring up this. I'm going to bring up some info for you, and we're going to go from the top. I was considering if we were going to do this via the old where they're currently sitting on the ladder, but I thought that'd be too easy because you just be like, contender, whatever. So we're going to do this alphabetically. We're going to start from the top. We're going to start with Adelaide, Jesse. We're currently sitting 5th on the AFL ladder, 4 wins, 3 losses, one of about 17 teams. That's not possible. We've had 6 teams, I think, currently on 4 and 3 at the moment. So I'm intrigued to see where some of these sit. That's going to be an interesting little clump, I reckon. Oh, the clumps are back. 124.2%. So they are sitting at the upper echelon of the 4-win crew. Jesse, your thoughts on the Crows this year? They've started off pretty strong, had a couple of hiccups here and there, including last week against Freo. Where are you seeing the Crows sitting at the moment?
I do think they're stumbling into that contenders bracket for the time being.
Okay.
They'd probably be one of the more vulnerable teams within that little collection for me, right? Just based on what we saw on Friday night, I was really disappointed with Adelaide on Friday night against Fremantle. But the thing that Adelaide have in their locker is a point of difference, and that is the way they attack. And when their attack works, I think they're a really hard team to beat. And I think we talked about this after the Geelong game a couple of weeks ago, leading into the Giants game, where if they can get a finals run that avoids shut down defensive teams, I think they can go a very long way into September. And I stand by that even now, because of the 3 games they've lost, they lost to Gold Coast in very much that Spider-Man meme format of the same person looking at each other. Lost to Geelong in a high-scoring game, but against a pretty organised side in Geelong. And I think they'll be disappointed in the way they lost to Fremantle on Friday night. I think they allowed the game to be dictated to them, which even against sides like Geelong, I haven't seen from Adelaide this year. In saying that, they got the scalp over the Giants in a win-ugly game earlier, which I think is a positive. So I'm still keeping them in the contenders bracket for now, but they're probably one to watch as we get closer to that halfway point.
Yep. Hard to disagree. Contenders for me as well. Let's move on to the next team, Jesse. Why don't we? And that is the reigning defending AFL champions or premiers as they were. The Brisbane Lions currently sitting second, 6 wins, 1 loss, 112.7%, only in second place on percentage. Liking what we're seeing from the Lions so far, but there are a few little gaps I still find. I think they're gettable, but they're just good enough to get the job done week in and week out. Jesse, where do you have the Lions sitting in this first trimester?
Contenders for me, pretty clear. They've won 6 games. They've beaten good sides. The side they've lost to, and I will come to them relatively soon, but I think they're pretty good as well. Just to kind of forward into that. But look, I think a lot of Brisbane's concerns that we had was how they were going to go offensively this season. They're scoring as well as just about every contender around them. I don't think that's going to be an issue. They do need to cut out the slow starts. That's one thing that does need to change.
Yes.
But, I think that's something you can work on. And they have a lot of top-end talent. They've got a lot of experienced guys too. I think that can be turned around as we get closer to the season. I think they're clearly, deeper into the season, I think they're clearly a team to beat going into the latter part.
100%. But yeah, those slow starts, I think, are going to get them when they play the better teams of the competition, which, we've seen once already this year, and only once. The rest of the time, they've been good enough to get the job done. Let's move on to the next team, the Carlton Blues. This is an interesting one. 11th currently. 3 wins, 4 losses, 122.4%. Pretty healthy percentage. Obviously, a massive win this week, which we'll talk about later in our game review. Massive. It's the win they needed. Jesse, have they turned their season around, or are we still putting them in the pretenders bracket?
Well, they've gone from duds to pretenders, so that's nice for them. So they have actually changed their bracket off the basis of that win against Geelong. But no, this Carlton side's not a contender. Very simply put, they're not a contender this season for me at all. I think Carlton fans have a right to be disappointed with this side, but they've gotten to 11th, so it's not completely gone awry. But realistically, are they better than any of the teams on 4 wins or more? I don't think so. Mm-hmm. Geelong, to their credit, is a big scalp for them and a win they desperately needed. But what have they beaten outside of that? They've beaten a pretty bad North side. Are we writing home about that? And they've beaten an even worse West Coast side. Are we even bothering getting a pen out at that point? No, in terms of a contending team, are we bothering even talking about it?
Oh, no, I wouldn't have thought so. But I think the way you put it at the start, this win over Geelong definitely took them up into the next bracket. But that bracket is the contenders. I'm with you, Jesse. I don't think so yet. Look, and this is the first trimester. Who knows what's going to happen in the second trimester? They could turn it around. This could be the catalyst they needed to throw this season wide open.
No, not enough depth.
There we go. Done. Jesse, let's move on to our next team. We're flying through these. I love this. This is great. The Magpies, currently first, 6 wins, 1 loss, 140.3%. Pretenders, surely.
Look, it's easy to point at the top of the ladder and say, "Oh, contenders." Oh, look how revolutionary this analysis is. They're clear contenders. I think where a lot of us are guilty of sleeping on Collingwood coming into this season. I don't know whether it was the hangover of the hangover coming out of 2024, which was, I think, a disappointment for Collingwood. But at the same time, they potentially did overachieve in 2023 as well. So it's almost like we've come into their peak period now. But because of the previous 2 seasons, the lines have gotten a little bit blurred in that regard. They're a very good side. And much like Adelaide, they have a point of difference in their forward line. They're not a conventional structure. And I think the good sides this year are running with unconventional structures up forward, and it's working. You look at the top 4 or 5 teams on the ladder, the word unconventional comes to mind for at the very least 3 of those. Mm-hmm. which shows that points of difference and smart coaching is making waves in season 2025. Collingwood have beaten good sides, they've beaten poor sides, they've won blockbuster games. They're rounding off a lot. They've travelled and won. I know that's not often an association with Collingwood, but they have managed to go away, get wins, go home, win again. Lots of positives. Hard to see them not playing finals at the very least. I think if they can remain steady, I mean, they're on a team with 5 green W's in their column at the moment. That alone puts them above the rest.
Yep. Hard to argue there. Another Magpies feast. We'd love to see it. Let's move on to the next team. The Bombers, interesting one, Jesse. Is it?
Duds for me.
Duds?
Yeah. I'm so uninterested by this Essendon side this season.
3 wins, Jesse. 3 wins, 3 losses. 12th in the ladder. Duds.
Okay. Let's step through those wins.
Okay.
They've beaten a woefully inconsistent Port Adelaide side.
Yep.
They've beaten West Coast by less than a goal.
Yeah, true.
Like, that's not great,
Mhm.
is it? Are we
No.
celebrating that? And they beat Melbourne, didn't they?
I believe so.
So that's like, so what are we talking there? We're talking 10th, 15th, 18th. You're not even pretending at that point, are you? Like,
No,
you're just not good.
And they don't have that. They don't have the big scalp yet. Now I'm just like, wait a second. Didn't they get a big scalp? Now I'm confused. I thought they got like a big one. Or am I thinking of St Kilda? I might be thinking of St Kilda.
So, well, Saints stung Geelong.
I think that's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, that's fine. We don't have to fact check Essendon. That's fine. But I think once they get a big scalp under their belt, I think we can talk about them differently. But at the moment, in the dud column for Jesse.
I'm unimpressed.
Yeah, unimpressed with the Bombers. Let's move on to the next team. That's our boys. Freo Dockers currently in 9th spot, 4 wins, 3 losses, 107.2%. Jesse, what are your thoughts on our boys? I thought it was interesting this last week. Again, not to go into too much detail, but it's amazing what they can do when they're fired up.
Pretenders.
I knew it too. Pretenders. Why Pretenders, Jesse? Explain yourself with your Fremantle shirt on, which, by the way, might I add, is a very cool Fremantle shirt. I like that shirt.
Thank you. The list is good enough. The list is good enough to be a contender. The game plan's not.
Mm.
The game plan's never going to be good enough to be a contender. We talked about this after... which loss? Well, it was one of the bad losses. The Sydney loss.
Yep.
Defensive game plans haven't won a flag since 2018.
Yeah, that's after Sydney, yeah.
Why are we here? Why am I having this conversation? The win on Friday is one of those buoyant moments of hope that you cling on to as a Fremantle fan, waiting for the search and rescue premiership helicopter to find you deep in the North Sea. But simply put, I don't think this side can contend. If what we've seen in the last 5 years in terms of something slightly changed in the game plan, and then the game plan just returns to default the next week, I'll need to get to halfway before I have any belief that Freo can contend this season. And even then, if they do start winning games, I don't think they can beat a Collingwood or a Brisbane.
Yeah.
In a final situation.
No. And that's fair to say too. I think most sane Fremantle fans would probably agree. I think there's obviously, like I said, a lot of buoyant hope. But, and we'll get to this when we get to the game recap, but what we saw in that Adelaide win, because while it was a win, we'll talk about that later. Let's move on, Jesse, to the next team. The Geelong Cats currently in 7th. Again, one of those teams in the 4 and 3, 119.6% at the moment. How are we seeing the Geelong Cats? They're the always theirs.
They're contenders. I know they'll be very flat coming off the back of the loss to Carlton, and that is a shock and it's disappointing. And you look at the fact they've dropped games to Carlton and St Kilda, you know, games they probably on paper should be winning, and I know football's not played on paper, but you reverse those results, they're second on the ladder at least. Percentage swings, they may be getting close to Collingwood's first spot. They'll be disappointed with the drop games, but they're not going to be facing either of those sides in the finals. So you can put those to one side, get on with it, keep winning against good sides. They've got the Brisbane scalp. That's what they need. They've got the Hawthorn scalp. So that's 2 sides in the top 4 that they've downed. They've got Adelaide, 3 sides in the top 5. That's a contender, is it not?
It is a contender. I was about to be like, well, if we'd won Melbourne, we would have been. But then the teams you just mentioned there for Geelong, much bigger scalps, much bigger challenges than the Demons. That's for sure. Let's move on, Jesse, to the Gold Coast Suns. An interesting one here. Currently sitting in third place with 5 wins and just the 1 loss, 1 game in hand. 150.1%. The percentage is still healthy, which means they're getting the job done with aplomb. What are your current thoughts on the Suns? Are they in for a maiden finals berth?
I'm going Contenders.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. If we did a quarterly review last week instead of whinging about a strategic plan that's a complete failure, a valid whinge, by the way, go see that on YouTube. If we did this last week, especially off the back of the loss to Richmond, I would have said Pretenders. But I love the way the Gold Coast Footy Club went about it against Sydney. And look, we'll get to Sydney. I can smell the dumpster fire from the other side of the country. But I liked what I saw in the way that a still developing playing group and a younger playing group was able to completely turn the tide against a much more experienced
big time
team.
Yep.
That is almost the last tick for me to go and say, right, 5-1. That's as good a platform as you can ask for, really, in this season. Go and get it done. And go, I don't know if I don't think top 4. I don't think top 4 just yet for this group. But anything other than finals from 5-1 with 150 percentage would be a colossal failure if they're not in top 8.
Probably one of the biggest Q clashes coming up for the Suns, I would say, in their history, which you can hear us talk about in Just the Tips on YouTube, where we go through the games next week and see who's going to win or who we think is going to win. But that's going to be a big one, and that's really going to solidify them as contenders if they can get that job done. That's for sure. Let's move on, Jesse, to the next team, the GWS Giants, who've kind of faltered the last couple of weeks, currently in 6th spot, 4-3, 120.4%. Thoughts on the Giants? Because this is a funny one for me, because obviously everyone at the start of the year had the Giants tippity top, potential minor premiers. They've got a fantastic list. They've got some fantastic players. But again, it seems to be that same thing with the Giants that we talk about. It's like, well, what is it that isn't getting them there consistently? What are your thoughts on the Giants this year? Pretenders, or duds?
I'm going Pretenders.
Ooh.
And as a key metric I want to use to back this up.
Okay.
From 1st to 11th, the Giants have the lowest points for in season 2025. So, Carlton, Fremantle, Port, and then your top 8, except themselves, obviously, have all outscored GWS. When you look at a side like the Giants, you think attacking football. That's, I think, a fair statement. They've got that quality in their forward line. Green, Callahan, Hogan, Stringer. These guys should be scoring a lot more than they are. While that's not happening, they're pretenders because they can't beat good sides with a defensive lockdown game. However, this is probably the side I'm most willing to upgrade to contenders, or I would say I'm most likely expecting to be upgrading to contenders as the season progresses.
Are you talking pretenders in the sense of like top 4, or just in general as to their preseason hype as to where they are now?
I think that's a good distinction to separate the questions. I think they can make top 4, but I think it's also clear they're not as good as people thought they were going to be. The one thing I did say about the Giants coming into the season, they strike me as a momentum side. Right now, momentum tap is firmly off. They've lost their last 2, they've lost 3 of the last 5. That momentum tap is pretty tightly off.
Mm-hmm.
If they can turn that around and get some wins, irrespective of the quality of opposition, just winning games of football, that changes pretty quickly for this team. But I need to see some improvement before putting a C instead of a P in front of the E-tenders.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on to our next team, which is the Hawthorn Hawks, currently sitting in 4th, 5-2, 116.1%. Obviously, big things for the Hawks this year we were expecting, and so far they're delivering. I could probably say, based on where they've come from in such a short amount of time. But Jesse, contenders? What say you?
Contenders. Sam Mitchell has one job in season 2025 for me, and that's get them to September. Just get them there. Even if you're talking 5th through 8, I think this side can win 4 finals back to back to back to back. I really do. I think if they can get in the top 8, they can win the premiership from anywhere because they have that X factor about them. Now, obviously, top 4 would be the preference.
Sure.
But then again, do you want a side like Hawthorn, who is a bit of a ride the lightning team, to go top 4, so pre-finals bye, so qualifying final, you win that, bye again, prelim final. Is that a great launching pad for a side like Hawthorn? I'd almost want to go the elimination final pathway. I know that's fraught with danger.
Sure.
But I do think that the pre-finals bye into a game, into another week off, if you win that game, isn't really helping. Maybe it's best to get top 4, lose that game, and then go the other way. But yeah,
well, listen, if they're the ride the lightning team and they have that week off after the pre-finals bye, maybe you don't want that elimination final, because guess what? If you're riding the lightning and there's no lightning to ride, you might lose that one.
That is true.
But I mean, it would be it'd be crazy to think, be like, guys, we'll finish 5th. That's fine. 5th is good. We like that. Ride the lightning. Keep playing
and then
every single week.
And then the secured a Grim Reaper just comes out. No.
Sorry, Hawthorn. All right, let's move on to our next team. The Melbourne Demons, currently in 15th, 2-5, 74.7%. Contenders, Jesse? Sorry. We shouldn't do that. That's not very nice. That's not very nice.
It's not very nice. I'm going to go with duds.
Okay.
Yes, they've won their last 2. They're a bad side. They're a bad side who's not expected to really do anything this year. I don't think we're going to see anything of particular note. Well,
they're not really pretending, right? Because we all expected them to be pretty bad. So they've fulfilled that quota.
They're playing their role.
They're playing their role. We love that, don't we, Jesse?
We do.
We do. All right, not much to say more about the Demons there. Let's move on to the Kangas, 17th. 1 win from their 7 games, 74.9%. Much like Melbourne. Probably about where they're going to be, right? Which is where, Jesse?
Yeah, they're duds. But can I actually add another subcategory here? I'm going to go disappointing duds for North.
Oh.
Because...
The old double D.
The old double D. Because they have conceded the most points in the competition of any side. They've really struggled to be even remotely involved in a couple of games this season. I mean, the Carlton game was embarrassing. The Sydney game was embarrassing. That win against Melbourne feels like a lifetime ago now.
Yeah, it does.
When you balance it out, it's hard to look at this North Melbourne side and feel that excitement for the future that we felt at the start of the year, because it just looks off. It looks like another down year. They don't have their first round draft pick this year, so this really needs to get sorted out. And I don't know, for the first time, I'm actually starting to feel like questions about Alistair Clarkson's coaching at this football club are valid concerns, because I don't think this is an acceptable standard, and they were much better on the weekend. We will preface it with that.
Yep.
But we do this every time, don't we? We say they're much better on the weekend, and they go lose by 50 points the next 2 weeks,
yep.
And then they have a better game. They might even win it, and then we go, yay! They're finally starting to turn the corner. This must be the longest gradual turn in a cul-de-sac we've ever seen, because the corner's not being turned.
No, unfortunately, no. It doesn't feel like it is, and I think we've been on the North bandwagon for at least the last year.
I want this North team to be good.
100%. But no, hard to argue with the dud status for this year, unfortunately, for the Kangas. Let's move on to our next team, the Port Adelaide Power. 10th, 4 wins, 3 losses, just shy of 100%. Even Stevens, about square. Jesse, the Power are an interesting one this year. What are your thoughts on the Power?
They're flirting with dud status. They're staying in Contenders for now.
Oh, so we're just skipping the Pretenders altogether. It's either contender,
sorry,
contender or dud.
I've misspoken there.
Okay.
They're not going to win a flag this year. You can almost, I don't want to say almost guarantee that, but you'd be pretty surprised if they did, based on what we've seen so far. I do think they're a pretender, flirting with dud status. The games they've lost this season, they'll be kicking themselves about. They've lost games to bad sides in Victoria. That's something that they need to stamp out of their game.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost games they feel like they probably should have won at home as well, but they've won their last 3. They have won their last 3 games. They've got a showdown in the near future. That'll be a good marker for where Port are. But right now, I'm struggling to see how this side can contend with the Jekyll and Hyde that they're currently displaying, and I don't think they're really pushing themselves this year. As odd as that, I don't know if the succession plan is having a real disruption effect on the playing group. You look at Jason Horne-Francis on the weekend.
Yeah.
You know how ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's not a good look, that type of stuff, and it also makes me wonder what's really going on behind the scenes at Port. I just don't see how this team is a threat at the moment in a finals environment.
Pull the pin now. Change of coaches.
I do think winning the last 3 has probably helped.
Sure.
But I don't think you'd also be wrong to do, because they've got a positive record, 4-3. If that drops to 5-7, 5-8, I think you're considering it.
Yeah, pull the trigger for sure. All right, let's move on from the Power and move on to the next team, the Richmond Tigers, 16th with 2 wins, which I think a lot of people were already surprised by. 5 losses, 66.9%. There should be like a little caveat here, because I think there's like...
You know what? I'm going to call them... I'm going to put them into pretenders, only so I don't have to call them duds.
Fair enough.
Because... You know, they're pretending in the sense that they're not going to win a premiership. But I think they've exceeded their expectations for a lot of people this season. And I really do believe that if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, while they've had some disappointing losses, if you average out their footy over the 28 quarters they've played, they've been a lot better than people thought they were going to be. That deserves plaudits, and I don't want to label them as duds.
I think we still got to be realistic about it. We've put a lot of other teams in the dud status.
No, I'm sticking with it. Fair because I want to reward teams that are actually punching above their weight. Not teams...
They're pretenders in the sense that we thought they were going to be duds and they're not duds. They're pretending to be something great. I'm with you. It makes sense, Jesse.
I mean, if they win a couple of games on the bounce, they've got West Coast in their near future.
It's true.
They win a couple of games. They've got 4 wins.
Mm-hmm.
You're not talking a dud then. I mean, I don't even think you're talking necessarily a dud now based on what they've done relative to what their expectations were.
Yeah, that's probably fair too. I think they've, probably not a winnable one coming up for them, but hey, I think
We said that about Carlton.
That is very true.
We said that about Gold Coast.
Holy moly, you're so right. Can they do the Hawks in this week? Find out later on Just the Tips. Moving on to the St Kilda Saints, Jesse. I've been waiting for this one. 13th. 3 wins, 4 losses, 85.7%. A couple of big wins. They went on a little bit of a run, bit of a tear a couple of weeks ago. And where's that gone?
They're duds.
Duds. All right, cool.
Unfortunately, there's just nothing that St Kilda offer that make me think they're going to finish any better than 11th or 12th. And that's peak for me. Then they're not defending well at all. In fact, only 4 teams have conceded more than 700 points this season. They're one of those. So we're talking bottom 4 defense purely based on points against. Offensively, they're okay. They're still in that kind of middle to lower percentile bracket. So your third grouping there. So It's not doomsday by any stretch, but it's also not good enough to push forward. And I don't know how sustainable this is to be relying on Higgins to kick all your goals.
Yep.
I just don't. I don't see how that's sustainable.
I think there's been a definite change in how the Saints play from Ross the Boss. And I think that's kind of par of the course with the changes that we're seeing.
I think Ross is trying to get the best out of a younger group that probably isn't going to be as disciplined and rigid as he would like. I know it's not something St Kilda fans are going to want to hear, but this might just be purely a transition year while you try to keep the signature of Wayne Glenn-Miller. You try to show some attractive football to bring in some other talent from outside, because right now this St Kilda list isn't close to being a contender. They need to bring in talent from the outside. You're not going to do that by playing boring football. I think this might be a case of short-term pain for long-term gain in season 2025 for St Kilda.
Yep, I don't hate that either. for the Saints. If I was a Saints fan, I'd be very happy with that. But hey, we'll see how they go the rest of the year. Let's move on to the Swans, 14th. 2 wins, 5 losses, 94.6%. I feel like I know what your answer is going to be, Jesse. They haven't been very good.
They've been rubbish.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
They've been terrible.
So?
They're the biggest duds in this list, are they not?
I'd say they're probably up there, yeah. Or down there, as it were.
Down there. So the 2 sides they've beaten North, who, as discussed, worst defence in the league, statistically, based on points against. And they've beaten Fremantle in, I'll call it an arm wrestle, but it was really like a thumb war. Because it didn't have any of the strength of an arm wrestle at all.
Yeah.
Outside of that, they've just thrown away game after game from winnable positions. There is no mental toughness in Sydney right now. Not one shred of mental toughness exists in the Sydney environment at the moment. They cannot do it.
Is this a symptom of the new coach situation potentially?
That's a hard one to answer. Absolutely a possibility. Potentially your most likely candidate in that regard. But I also saw this coming, even with Longmire remaining on as coach. I think when we did our season preview, I'm fairly sure Longmire was still coaching.
I think it was around the time we did that was when the call was made. I think probably the week after, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Even if it's a case of it was known before we did the preview, I still stand by the fact I didn't have Sydney making finals this year.
Yep.
Because I thought they were inconsistent and fell over the line into that minor premiership last year. They were destroyed in the grand final. Off the back of being destroyed in the grand final 2 years prior, eventually that catches up with you. And I didn't think this team had the mental toughness to bounce back from that. In saying that, they've disappointed even those expectations. I had them in 9th, I think, in my season preview. Right now, they're lucky they're not in the bottom 4, and they've got a really bad bottom 4 below them because they're not playing anywhere close to a standard of football that the Sydney Football Club would be expecting.
Yep, fair shout. Let's move on to our next team. We're nearly there. 2 more teams to go. What to say about the West Coast Eagles? Currently last, haven't had a win. Percentage is at 55.9%. I mean, unfortunately, they are duds. They're duds. Yeah. They're duds.
There's no way around that.
There's no way around it. Unfortunately, it's just how it is. There's not. Is there any redeeming factors, Jesse?
No, and that's a real concern because if you look at the players that we hoped to see seasons from, we'll give Waterman a pass. I think he still looks very dangerous, and he still commands that forward line very well. But he's had a bit of injury disruption. I don't think it's fair to really grade him strong pass or strong fail at this point. And you probably put him in the middle. Harley Reid, that's been really disappointing.
Yep.
You know, Bo Allen was the next big thing coming through. Haven't seen him.
Has he played yet?
No, not in the seniors at least.
Wow.
Oscar Allen, I mean, the less said about that for West Coast fans, the better. On-field leadership from guys like Allen, Kelly, Duggan has been woeful. Their best player, I think, in parts of the season, Matt Flynn, has also flirted with the waffle. At times, that's not good. It's not pretty for the Eagles at the moment. They've had to drop senior player after senior player because they're not meeting standards. We've had Waterman go on radio and say that the new players aren't meeting basic training standards. Liam Baker's been a bright spark.
Yeah, he has.
But he came in as a very good player, a dual premiership player who's known for exactly what his output is, and he's just transferred his output. He's not gotten worse, but I also wouldn't say he's gotten better, which isn't a criticism of Baker. It's just you get a guy at that age bracket who has an established track record. That's what you're expecting.
But that's not what always happens when people come from different teams. I mean, look at Tim Kelly. You know, his benchmark was really high. He came to the Eagles and it kind of fell off pretty quick. I'm not even just talking about the falling out of love with footy that he said this year. Like pretty much from the get-go, unfortunately, with Tim, it feels. So, I mean, the fact that Baker's come in and he's doing what he's always done is to be commended, I think.
It says a lot that there's already serious calls for him to be captain of the footy club. And, you know, I don't disagree with that. He's an on-field leader. He commands respect and he leads by example, which I don't really think you can look at Duggan or Allen right now and say objectively, these two are leading by example.
Yep. Fair shout. Let's move on to the last team of the season. No, of the teams, the Bulldogs currently sitting at 8th with 4 wins, 3 losses, 114%. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from the Bulldogs this year, Jesse, but what about you?
Yeah, I think they're contenders. I was a bit colder on the Dogs than most of the sides that are currently in the top 8 at the moment. I didn't really know what to expect from them, especially with the Jamara stuff. But honestly, I think the Jamara Ugle-Hagen noise has galvanised the playing group and brought them tighter, because it's a case of, well, we all want to be here. Let's play for each other and fight for each other. And they are playing for each other and fighting for each other. They seem to have gotten over the worst of their injury crisis. Touch wood, that stays the same for their sake. They've got excellent players. Is turning into a forward midfielder, which is terrifying for the competition.
Yes,
if he could replicate that from what he did on the weekend against Universe, if he could replicate that across the rest of the season, he actually might make a legitimate charge at the Brownlow after missing a month. Because those games, that's 2017 Dustin Martin areas of quality.
Yeah.
That's really exciting for them. They've got versatility in their forward line. I do really hope that Sam Darcy's injury is on that better side, as it's been reported, and we can get him back earlier than just the finals if they make it, because he could be anything.
Yeah.
And he already is so critical. But to be fair to players like Norton, they've stepped up.
He's picked it up.
Yep. Yeah. So fair play. I think they're contenders. I really do think you could put them in that same scenario as Adelaide. If they get a soft draw in the finals, I know every team you could make this case for, but I think they can really be impactful with that softer draw, much like 2016. Where have we seen this movie before?
That was a good movie too. I quite liked that. It was a nice little Cinderella story. It was very nice. We liked that. That's it, Jesse. That's our first trimester review of Pretenders, Contenders, and Duds. I think it was quite fun. What do you think, everybody? Where would you put people? Would you put Freo as a contender? Would you put the Bulldogs as a dud? Where would you put people? Let us know in the comments. Send us all the love on the socials as well.
Should we stick with the trimester format and not do a half season one? Just stick with
everyone does a half season, Jesse. We're the trimester kings now. Not sure if that's going to roll. We'll work on that. We'll workshop that. We'll come up with something better. I promise.
I think you need to try harder to make a better one there, Liam.
Very good. Well done, sir. Well done.